age of stone roads and bell towers, there was a question no one dared to ask aloud. Not in the market, not in the chapel, not even in the silence before sleep. The question was simple. Where do we go after we are born? The villagers believed they knew the answer. We are born, they said, to work the land, to pray, to love briefly, and to vanish quietly. The path was laid out like cobblestones, one step after another, no turns worth naming. Yet among them lived a man who walked more slowly than the rest. He was not a scholar, nor a knight, nor a priest. He was simply a man who noticed the space between steps. He wondered why birth felt less like a beginning and more like being placed gently, inexplicably, into motion. At night, he asked the darkness a question it did not answer. He prayed as others did, but his prayer was not for forgiveness, nor for reward. He asked only this: if I have been sent, then to where? No voice replied, but something listened. One morning, the bells rang without hands. The wind turned pages no one was reading. And for a brief moment, the world leaned closer, as if remembering him. He understood then, not with certainty, but with calm, that birth was not the question, and destination was not the answer. The going itself was the meaning. To be born was not to arrive. It was to be sent. And so he walked, not to escape the world, nor to conquer it, but to honor the quiet agreement made at his first breath. We ask where we come from. We ask where we go. But perhaps the older truth is this: we are already on the way, and the road remembers us, even when we forget it. In a certain kingdom, there lived a mapmaker named Elion. From a very young age, he showed an extraordinary talent for drawing maps. The rise and fall of mountains, the flow of rivers, even the positions of the stars. His maps were so precise that people often said, "With this map, one will never lose their way." Elion did not doubt those words. On the contrary, his confidence only grew stronger. My map can't be wrong. When people asked him for directions, he would unfold his map and say, "This road is wrong. This way is faster. That mountain is not dangerous. According to the map, when someone spoke of their own experience, Elion would smile gently and shake his head. You must be remembering it incorrectly. At first, the people of the kingdom trusted his certainty, but as time passed, fewer and fewer listened to his words. He always gave what seemed to be the right answer, yet, more and more often, his words failed to match the footsteps of those who followed them. One day, the king summoned Elion. To the north, the king said, "There lies a forest not yet marked on any map. I want you to chart its paths." Elion did not hesitate for even a moment. "Referring to my map will be sufficient, Your Majesty." He spread out old maps and filled the forest with imagination. By calculating the direction of the wind, the patterns of the terrain, and the structure of forests already known, he completed a map he believed to be perfect. But on the night before he set out for the forest, Elion had a strange dream. In the misted forest, there stood an old woman clad in robes. The old woman asked, "Do you know the paths of this forest?" Elion answered as though it were obvious, "Of course, I have studied every map." The old woman smiled quietly and said, "Then tell me, do you also know the roads you've not yet encountered?" Just as Elion was about to answer, the dream came to an end. The next day, Elion entered the forest alone. The map proved accurate, and for the first few days, there were no problems at all. His confidence in himself grew even stronger. But the deeper he went into the forest, the more the paths began to stray from the map. Where the map showed a straight road, fallen trees blocked the way. Where the map marked a shallow stream, the water rose to his knees. "This cannot be," Elion muttered. At that moment, a woman stepped out from a small cabin in the forest and spoke to him. "Are you looking for the way?" Elion showed her his map and replied, "No, I already know the way. It seems the forest has simply changed a little." The woman studied the map for a moment, then spoke gently. "This map resembles the forest from long ago, but this forest changes a little every year." Elion shook his head. "My map is accurate." The woman said nothing more. She simply pointed quietly deeper into the forest. "Then, try that path." Elion followed that path. But before long, he was lost. The map was no longer of any use. As night fell, the forest changed its voice. The wind hid its direction, and the stars disappeared behind the leaves. In that darkness, he remembered the old woman from his dream. "The roads you have not yet encountered." For the first time, Elion folded his map, and he listened to the forest. The sound of the wind, the dampness of the soil, the distant presence of flowing water. He stopped trying to see the path and began to feel it. In that moment, the forest slowly revealed itself. Days later, Elion emerged from the forest. In his hands was a new map, one unlike any he had drawn before. The lines were faint, the empty spaces were many, and scattered across the page were small notes. This path changes with the seasons. Listen to the words of those who live here. Uncertain. The king looked at the map and asked, "Why have you left so much unfinished?" Elion paused before answering, "Because I have learned that not all paths can be known." After that, the people of the kingdom began to trust Elion's maps once more. Strangely enough, it happened only after he stopped claiming to know everything. Now, when people speak, Elion listens until the very end. When someone shares a different experience, he replies, "That may be so. It might be a road not yet on the map." Elion still draws maps. But now, his most important tool is no longer his pen. It is his ear. The moment we believe we know all the answers, we lose the questions. And those who lose their questions often do not realize they are lost. We must always remain open to all things. The sea was still asleep. Before sunrise, the sea was always the most honest. It demanded nothing and hid nothing. The old man pushed his small boat and followed the same path as always. It was a morning no different from yesterday. He paused for a moment and breathed in the scent of the sea. The fact that this morning still remained made him feel at ease. The old man rowed. Each stroke made a small sound as the oar cut through the water. The waves answered with a gentle sway. He did not fight the sea. He did not try to win or to prove anything. He simply moved, at the same pace, in the same direction, together with it. To him, the sea was not a challenge, but a companion for the day. The sun rose slowly, drawing a path of light across the water. The old man lowered his fishing line and watched it disappear until the very end. Waiting was no longer patience to him. It was proof that he could still stand here, unchanged. The time when nothing happened did not make him uneasy. The fishing line trembled, just slightly, so small it could be missed. The old man did not rush. He did not tighten his grip. He knew that hurried hands often lose what is good. Life, too, had always arrived this way. Today's fish was not large. It was not something people would boast about. The old man looked at it and smiled quietly. There was food for today, a day to be lived, and wind that still moved. He did not want to lose this day by wishing for something greater. For him, this was enough. The boat turned back toward the shore. The sun was already high. The old man looked back at the sea. The fact that he could return safely today made him feel lighter. He would walk this path again tomorrow. That thought felt not like a burden, but like a promise. The village was slowly waking. The smell of bread, people moving about, the slow steps of a cat. Though it was a small harbor town, it was always full of life. The old man exchanged greetings, put away his fishing rod, and cleaned the fish. No one watched him for long. He was not special, and that made him comfortable. A good life is not loud. It knows how to stay. As the sun leaned toward evening, the old man ate the bread he had saved. The sounds of the day slowly settled inside the house. He could not explain this day, but he did not need to. The old man looked at the sea in the evening. Nothing great had happened today. Nothing was lost, and nothing overflowed. So, today was a good day. As long as mornings return, and hands remember their work, an ordinary life will always be enough. In the years after the war ended, the valley remained silent. Not the peaceful silence of rest, but the kind that lingers after screams have been buried too deeply in the earth. Houses stood without doors. Fields forgot how to grow grain. And in the center of that valley, every evening at dusk, a woman sat with a harp. She did not play to be heard. She played because the silence demanded it. Her harp was old, its wood scarred by fire and ash. Some said it had been pulled from the ruins of a chapel. Others believed it had once belonged to a soldier who never returned. The woman never corrected them. She tuned the strings with careful hands, as if touching memories rather than wood. Each string carried a name she never spoke. When she began to play, the music did not rise. It fell, softly, like snow onto graves. The melody was uneven. Sometimes a note trembled. Sometimes it broke entirely. Yet no one who passed through the valley ever forgot that sound. Children stopped crying when it reached them. Old people closed their eyes, not to sleep, but to remember. She had lived through the war. Not as a hero, not as a soldier, but as someone who remained. She had buried her brother with bare hands. She had learned the weight of silence after names are no longer called. The harp became her language when words failed her. Travelers sometimes asked her what the song meant. She always answered the same way. "It is not about the war," she said. "It is about what remains after." As years passed, grass slowly returned to the valley. Children began to play near the ruins. The houses did not rebuild themselves, but people stayed. But still, every dusk, the woman returned to the same place. Her hands grew old. Her hair became silver. The harp's strings were replaced, one by one. But the song remained unfinished. One day, a young boy asked her, "Will the song ever end?" The woman smiled, not sadly, but gently. "It will," she said, "when no one needs it anymore." On the day the woman did not return, the valley noticed immediately. People gathered where she once played. The harp rested there, untouched. No one dared to play it. But that night, the wind passed through the strings, and for the first time, the sound did not weep. It was resting. Some say the woman became part of the valley. Others believe she finally laid down the pain she had carried for so long. But when the dusk is quiet, and the world feels heavy with unspoken grief, some swear they still hear it. A harp, not mourning, but remembering. On the hill overlooking the medieval town, where wind reached before any human sound, stood a small stone observatory. It leaned slightly toward the sky, as if years of watching had taught it where to turn. Inside lived an old astronomer, a scholar of the older tradition, working without lenses or telescopes. He relied on the naked eye, on instruments of wood and brass, and on patience shaped over decades. During the day, he passed through the town almost unseen. He bought bread, paid exact coins, and walked home without leaving a trace. When night arrived, his hours began. He climbed the narrow stone stairs with the certainty of someone who had repeated the motion for a lifetime. At the top, he opened the wooden shutters and let the night enter. The sky spread above him like a vast manuscript, unbound and unfinished. He laid out his tools: a brass astrolabe, a wooden quadrant, knotted strings, and markings carved into stone. They were enough to follow the skies. He observed the skies by following their movement. The slow drift of constellations, the wandering of the bright planets, the brief arrival of comets, all recorded with steady care. Some nights, the changes were barely visible. A star rising earlier than before, a planet hesitating near dawn. He wrote them down anyway. Other nights, clouds erased the sky completely. On those nights, he wrote nothing and simply waited. Doubt returned quietly. What was the meaning of tracking motions? That did not ask to be understood. Why search for patterns that could never be completed? He remembered the years when nobles wanted predictions and priests demanded signs. He refused them all. He believed the skies were not messages meant for humans. They simply moved, whether watched or not. As years passed, his sight weakened. The markings blurred, and the candlelight grew insufficient. One winter night, he understood what his work had been. He had not observed the skies to master them, but to take part briefly in something that would continue without him. That night, he wrote his last note. I followed the movements of the skies. After I stopped writing, they would continue. After his death, the observatory became a place of records. Other scholars arrived, not to finish his work, but to read it. They saw measurements, corrections in the margins, and gaps left by clouded nights. They understood that the work had never belonged to a single lifetime. In time, another scholar stood at the entrance of the observatory. He brought no new instruments, only the same patience. The skies kept moving, and someone continued the record. A reminder that a lifetime of patience and observation, quiet, unfinished, and unseen, can still be deeply valuable. Rain drifted softly across the medieval village, wrapping the whole village in a muted grey. The world seemed slower under the gentle rainfall, as if the day itself were pausing, waiting, listening. Beneath the eaves of an old wooden house, a small black cat named Mira sat quietly. Her whiskers twitched at the cold, but she wasn't afraid. She was simply waiting, watching, breathing in the quiet. High above her, balanced on a rooftop, beam slick with rain, a young crow observed her with curious eyes. Corvin had seen this cat before. Quiet, soft-footed. Different from other cats who chased first and asked questions, never. Something about her stillness held him there. Corvin fluttered down through the rain-heavy air, landing at a careful distance. Close enough to be seen, far enough not to startle her. Then he offered his most precious treasure, a tiny button he'd stolen days ago. He placed it by her paws and bowed his head, as if performing a small, private ritual. Mira blinked once. She looked at the button, then at him. With a gentle creature's quiet grace, she nudged the button back toward him. Not refusal, not acceptance, just acknowledgement. In that moment, Corvin felt his chest warm in a way it didn't recognize. No one had ever understood his gifts. So he stayed beside her, beneath the eaves, waiting out the rain together. Two quiet lives sharing the same shelter. After that morning, they were rarely apart. Villagers whispered warmly whenever they saw them. There they go, again the pair. Children tried to follow them. Even the old blacksmith left scraps of meat out for Mira and grain crumbs for Corvin. Mira spent long hours beneath market stalls, watching people shuffle, argue, laugh, stumble, sigh. Perched on the roof of the church, Corvin watched from above, mapping the village in his mind like a living tapestry of tiny stories. Together, they observed the world from two different heights. Her from the ground, him from the sky. Yet always close. One morning, the market woke not to calm chatter, but to the frantic voice of the baker. My bread, someone keeps stealing my bread every night. I'll go out of business. I'm ruined. The villagers gathered in concern. A mystery, Corvin whispered, his feathers trembling with excitement. Mira blinked, slowly. She didn't know the words, but she understood distress. And helping those in distress had become something they quietly did together. That night, the pair set out to solve the mystery. Corvin watched from a high roof, silent and unseen, while Mira slipped into the shadows with effortless grace. Hours passed. The village slept. Just before dawn, a figure emerged from the bakery. Not a thief, not a stranger. It was the baker himself. Sleepwalking, carrying his own bread into the yard. Corvin tilted his head so far sideways, he nearly toppled off the roof. Does he know he's doing that? And Mira answered, no, and we should tell him. The next morning, Mira nudged a piece of bread to the baker's boots. Corvin dropped a twig beside it, a perfect detective's clue. The baker stared, then slowly turned bright red. Oh no, it was me all along. The villagers burst into warm laughter. Not mocking, just relieved. From that day on, the baker saved a warm bread just for them. Every dawn, the gentle cat and the curious crow walked together through the waking village. Two quiet beings who belonged to no one, yet had somehow become friends to the entire village. A gentle world, because they lived in it. The plains were wide and silent, stretching farther than any road could follow. And in that quiet land, a great horse was born. Large, dark, and fiercely alive. He was raised at a small farm, A quiet place of stone walls, wooden fences, and the smell of damp hay. To others, he was wild and untamed. But to the old farmer, he was gentle, as if he had chosen him from the very beginning. When strangers approached, the great horse would lower his head, stamp the earth, and warn them away. He became the farm's silent guardian. Years passed. The farmer grew old. One morning, he placed a hand on the horse's neck and whispered the only farewell he knew. Go, live freely. The fields are yours. For the first time, the horse felt the weight of nothing. He ran across hills, forded rivers, and wandered through forests so deep that even the wind moved quietly. Then one night, as the moon grows full and the stars spread across the sky, a knight saw him, a horse like iron and dusk. And the horse, who trusted no one, stood still before him. No command was given. No rope was used. The horse simply walked to the knight, bowed his head, and chose a master for the second time. Together they rode into war. Through smoke, steel, and dust. Where other horses faltered, the great horse endured. And where the knight fell, he carried him forward. They earned their honor together. But wars do not end kindly. The knight carried a wound that refused to heal. One night, beneath a dim lamp, the knight breathed his last. The horse waited beside him, motionless, as if guarding him one final time. As the night grew deeper, the horse stepped away from the house, where no familiar voice remained. Without anger, without fear, only with the simple understanding that his journey was not over yet. He wandered across the land once more. Through plains, forests, hills, and wind. Not searching for a master, not fleeing from sorrow, but simply living, as the great horses once did, when the world was young. in a small medieval village at night. Maria walked with her cloak pulled tight, her steps quick, shoulders tense. Everyone said it was peaceful. But every sound struck her, like a tap on raw nerves. The wagon's creak, the blacksmith's hammer, and people's voices. Each noise made her flinch, a faint scowl settling between her brows. At home, pots clinked and chairs scraped the floor. Her mother sighed, arms crossed. Maria, stop frowning, and you could speak a little more kindly. Maria answered irritably, I'll try, if the noises don't get to me first. The next day, when she went to the market to sell her harvest, outside, a faint tremor in the wind brushed her ear. A vibration so thin it felt imagined. Maria winced, lifting her head. Storm's coming, she said, irritated. People chuckled, glancing up at the clear blue sky. By night, heavy rain hammered the rooftops. Mud splashed, children cried, and hurried footsteps echoed everywhere. Maria pressed her hands over her ears. Too loud, she muttered. When the storm passed, the village woke to chaos under a grey sky. Roofs leaking, barrels split. Maria closed her eyes tight, fingers digging into her temples. Can everyone not yell? She said. As villagers repaired the damage, a neighbor leaned toward another, whispering too loudly. She snaps at everyone, like a witch. Maria's ear twitched. She caught every word. Her jaw tightened as she looked away. By midday, the air felt wrong. Too still, too heavy. Maria paused as she arranged the stall, eyes narrowing as she tasted the wind. The river's rising, she muttered, irritation sharpening her voice. No one looked at her. Hours later, shouts burst across the village. The river's overflowing. People ran in confusion, splashing through mud. Maria stood among them, her expression fixed and unmoving. At dinner, bowls clattered and chairs scraped. Each sound making Maria's eyelids twitch. Her father sighed. Could you speak a little more kindly? And your expression, too. Maria didn't say a word. Why are you always irritated? Her brother asked, between bites. Maria opened her mouth, then shut it. Explaining would only exhaust her. She stepped outside for air. The night breeze brushed her cheek. Cool, steady, the only gentle thing she knew. Then it shifted. A faint tremor ran through it, barely there, but undeniable. Maria knelt and pressed her palm to the earth. A tiny vibration pulsed up her arm. Light as breath, but steadily growing. Grounds loosening. She hurried home. "Mum, the hillside is going to give way," she said. Brow creased deeply. Her mother waved a hand. "Maria, enough." Maria lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The night was quiet, too quiet, like the world was waiting. Tonight, the quiet of the night made her uneasy. A sharp crack split the silence. Maria bolted upright, heart pounding. She knew that sound. Earth surrendering. At dawn, part of the hillside had fallen. Crushed sheds. Spoiled grain. Villagers shouting and stumbling about. No one had sensed it. Only she had felt it. A villager approached her. "You knew, didn't you?" Maria didn't respond. She didn't need to. They had called her rude, difficult, a constant complaint. But in the ruined morning light, they understood, at last. She heard danger before it arrived. Which meant she was bound to be more sensitive than the rest. "Why didn't you speak more seriously?" someone asked, voice trembling. Maria exhaled through her nose, a tired glare in her eyes. "I've always told you all. You were the ones who ignored me." The villagers fell silent. Finally, understanding the weight she carried, a villager spoke quietly. "Then speak as you do. We'll try to listen. And, could you speak just a little more gently?" His voice was unsure, but honest. Maria pulled her cloak tighter, eyes sharp as ever. "If you're trying to comfort me, you don't have to," she said. "But from now on, I'll try as well." Maria walks again today. The world was still noisy, but the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. For the first time, she wasn't carrying the noise alone. At dawn, the monastery bell echoed softly across the valley. The monks rose in silence, moving with steady discipline. Brendan followed them, though his mind drifted elsewhere, while the others chanted the psalms. Brendan stared absently at a ceiling beam, until a sharp throat clear snapped him back. "I was in deep meditation," he whispered. During bread duty, he tried to stay serious. His fingertips were busy forming an adorable little puppy all on their own. The senior monk glared again. When the dough was finally set aside, Brendan slipped into the wine cellar, just to check the barrels. But he quickly stole a tiny sip. Feeling a light buzz, and wanting a moment to rest, Brendan volunteered for mushroom gathering. The forest greeted him, with soft earth and drifting birdsong. He lay in the grass, just for a moment, and peacefully drifted into sleep. On his way back, Brendan drank from the spring, and froze. That's odd. A faint earthy taste, subtle but unmistakable to him. When the spring shifts like this, he murmured, the storage rooms never stay dry. He checked the grain storage first. Several barley sacks were damp. Then the fish cellar, where salted carp and trout were kept for fasting days. Moisture glistened on the stone walls, and the fish was still in decent condition. He immediately went to the other monks to report it. "The spring always speaks first," he said quietly. "If we ignore it, the grain spoils, and the fish follows soon after." The monks stared at him in surprise. Brendan, playful, unfocused Brendan, had sensed what none of them noticed. That evening, the abbot inspected the damp grain and sweating walls. "It's beginning to spoil," he murmured. He glanced at Brendan. "We might have been in real trouble without you." Brendan rubbed his neck, embarrassed. "Even springs like to play tricks," he said softly. "Maybe God does too." The next morning, during prayer, Brendan's gaze drifted upward again. Just a little. He folded his hands together and smiled quietly. "Today as well? Let me play just a little, my lord." Every dawn, before the village stirred, the Jester practiced, under the willow at the village edge. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply liked how the morning air felt when he moved. Balls dropped often. Some bounced too far. But he smiled every time. "That fall had a kind rhythm," he said. As the Jester walked toward the square, People greeted him softly. Not because he was entertaining, but because his presence was gentle. He greeted everyone back with the same quiet warmth. In the village square stood a single wooden crate. It wobbled slightly, but the jester treated it as a real stage. His grand platform of wonders. He climbed up carefully, hands trembling from excitement. He tossed 3 wooden balls into the air. 2 floated back softly. The third slipped, bounced off his shoulder, and fell. The jester blinked, then smiled. "That was gentler than yesterday," he said. And somewhere in the village, a small boy spent his days quietly following the jester's routine, wearing a clumsy little outfit he had sewn to look just like the jester's. He was quietly waiting for the day the jester would finally notice him. One afternoon, the jester lost one of his wooden balls near the riverbank. He searched under stones, between reeds, even inside an empty barrel. While he was flustered, searching all around for the missing ball, the small boy quietly approached and began looking for it beside him. It didn't take long before the boy found the ball. "Here, I found it." The jester turned, and in that moment, the boy finally came into full view. A small patched vest, a crooked sash tied around his waist, sleeves made from scraps of old cloth. Clumsy, mismatched, uneven, yet unmistakably modeled after the jester's own outfit. The jester softened a little. They picked up the ball and headed back to the village. "Why do you dress like me?" the jester asked gently. The boy hesitated. "Because you look happy when you practice, and I wanted to feel that too." The jester smiled. "Then practice with me." They practiced slowly. The boy dropped the ball many times, but the jester simply smiled and said, "That fall sounded gentle. That bounce must have been excited." And the boy laughed each time. The next morning, the two of them stepped onto a slightly wider wooden stage, replacing the old shaky crate. The boy was still clumsy and a little nervous, but he felt a quiet joy simply to stand beside the jester he admired. The stage creaked softly, yet the sunlight warmed them both. The jester was still a little awkward, but the boy didn't care. And the two of them, on that small wooden stage, were enough.